Good morning and welcome to Empowering Older. This is Strengthening Independent Living with Resources and Support, a pilot education series for community and faith partners hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council, the San Francisco Department of Disability and Aging Services, and the Institute on. This series is supported by a grant from the Meta Fund. In today's session is abuse prevention, and the training will be led by Glen Fishman, Program Development Specialist for Elder Abuse Prevention at the Institute on Aging. The twofold focus of today's presentation will be to increase your ability to recognize the warning signs of elder abuse and neglect, as well as the prevalence of abuse, and to increase your understanding of Francisco's Adult Protective Services Department and California's elder abuse mandated reporting requirements. And at the end, you'll have a chance to ask your questions. A bit of housekeeping: today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the host and answered, time permitting. And if you need closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of the screen and enable live transcription. Today's agenda will start with Michael Pappas, the Executive Director of the Interfaith Council, and then we'll move to Glen Fishman. With this, we hand the floor over to Michael. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council and our collaborating partners, I want to welcome you to this first in a series of 6 training sessions entitled Empowering Older Adults. Communities of faith are hubs where older adults feel safe, valued, and may escape social isolation. Faith and lay leaders entrusted with their spiritual care are, more often than not, first responders in instances when the well-being of older adults is at risk. To better equip faith-affiliated caregivers with the necessary insights, skills, and resources to minister to this vulnerable sector, the San Francisco Interfaith Council, in collaboration with the San Francisco Department of Disability and Aging Services and the Institute on Aging, supported by a grant from the Meta Fund, offers this 6-week online training series entitled Empowering Older Adults. This week's training session, the first, entitled Elder Abuse Prevention, will be led by Glen Fishman, Program Development Specialist for the Elder Abuse Prevention at the Institute on Aging. As Trey noted, the twofold focus of his presentation will be: 1, to increase the ability to recognize the warning signs of elder abuse and neglect, as well as the prevalence of abuse, and 2, to increase the understanding of San Francisco's Adult Protective Services Department and California's elder abuse mandated reporting requirements. Glen, we welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Trey, for having me. I'm really excited to be the first presenter on this 6-week series. Each week is great topics, practical topics. So I hope you can watch them all. And what's really exciting for me is that this will take us through June, and June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is a internationally recognized day of, again, bringing awareness to elder abuse prevention. So we're wonderful that this is kind of coincides with all of that. And while June 15th is the actual day in California, we really set aside the whole month of June to bring awareness to elder abuse prevention. So this is a great kickoff. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, hopefully you can all see that okay. So as Michael said, we're going to increase hopefully our understanding of elder abuse. We'll look at the scope of the problem, the types of abuse, who is abused, who is the abuser. And then the last portion, we'll get into mandating reporting, which I would assume most of you on this call are mandated reporters. So we'll discuss who mandated reporters are and how to report elder abuse. So I don't want to overwhelm you too much. There's a lot I'm going to cover. I might move through some of these slides quickly, but you will have access to these slides to review again. So you don't really need to know everything. You just need to know a little bit more about elder abuse than your congregants. And of course, where to send them and how to report. So let's start with the legal definition of an elder. And in California, an elder is 65 and older. It varies state by state, but here in California, it's 65. A dependent adult is anyone between 18 and 64. And those are people that have issues with their activities of daily living and such. And we'll be referring to caregivers, and that's any person who has the care, custody, or trust of an older or dependent adult. And that's whether paid or unpaid. So it could be a family member that lives with the older adult, or it could be a paid caregiver. I also like to just mention what the definition of elder abuse, and it's the acts of omission or commission by a person who stands in a trusted relationship that can result in harm or threaten harm. Again, that could be a paid or unpaid relationship. And what's nice about California is back in 1986, they enacted Penal Code 368, and that defines certain laws around elder abuse, like a speedier trial, a stiffer sentence by the abuser. So we have that helping our older adults. I also like to give a sense of the scope of how many older adults we have in the United States, independent adults. So I kind of like this scale. It's pretty visual on the left. Back in 1960, we had population of more younger people, and then it was less as they got older. And 2060, they're projecting a big shift in that. So we're going to have a lot more older adults than younger adults, and we need to have eyes on these people. I think it's interesting that the 85 and older is going to surpass younger adults. So just keep that in mind when we discuss elder abuse prevention. There's 52.4 million Americans who are over 65 right now. That's the census from 2020. The census from 2010 had, I think, 32 million or something. So just continues to increase. Same with Americans with disabilities. Back in the 2010 census, there were 1 in 5 people with disabilities. Now it's 1 in 4. So, just be aware of this. And by 2035, older adults are going to outnumber children. So how bad is the problem? Unfortunately, it's bad. One study that we all go by from the NCEA is 1 in 10 elders are abused every year. And as far as swindling, so that's like, telemarketers, insurance agents, as many as 1 in 5. So as you can see, a lot of people are being abused. There is an issue, though, of reporting abuse. So on the right-hand side, you could see they predict only 1 in 23 cases get reported. So big discrepancy between the number of people being abused and the number of people that report abuse. And so hopefully we can all be better about reporting. It has its challenges, reporting. So one, we have a definition problem of what is abuse, and we'll cover some of that. And there's this underreporting issue. I kind of like to put up a poll now. I was at a conference recently, and this was interesting to hear. So hopefully you could all see this. So have you ever been approached by a scammer? Phone call, email, text. Yeah, people are jumping right on. That's great. You get the call from the IRS, of course. Most of us have gotten those, or your bank. There's an issue with your account or your Amazon account. So on the call today, a majority of the people get those calls and get those emails and texts. I certainly got those. You can see the results there. And then the next question I have is, did you report that scamming? Right. So I think the majority of don't. And if you think about it, those calls, you know, the people are trying to extort money from you, or those texts. It's almost the equivalent of being virtually mugged in a way. So I think this kind of highlights the point that reporting, there's an underreporting issue going on. So like usually when I do this poll, I get these same results all the time. We don't usually report these things. And, you know, it's hard to. It's not easy. I admit that. There's reporting fatigue. You're not going to want to contact someone about every time you get that IRS call or something. And the big issue, too, is where to report. Is it the Better Business Bureau, the Federal Trade Commission, AARP? There's just so many entities working on this that we just don't know where to go for that. You know, preparing for this session, I did a little research, and I found this part really fascinating. There was a Pew Research study done in 2007 and 2014. I couldn't find anything more recent than 2014, but they surveyed older adults, and 48% of 65 and older people reported attending services and events at least once per week. And of the 65 years, of those 65 years and older, 91% reported they were affiliated with a particular faith tradition. So this is a great opportunity to have eyes and ears on older adults and to spot elder abuse. I really like this quote from Reverend Dr. Hunter. That said, it should be no surprise that older adults, especially if they are members of a minority communities, report that if they were facing abuse, their first stop would be members of the clergy. So I think that's really good to know. And those of you faith leaders realize that you know, you might be hearing these things. Basically, older adults trust and feel safe in their communities. So that's great that you'll have interaction with them. And then just yesterday, I just threw this up last minute. There's a great podcast came out yesterday by Reverend Dr. Hunter and Allison Katzman from Safe Havens. Talks about the critical role of faith communities in working for elder justice. So I really recommend everybody take a listen to that. Again, you'll have copies of these slides, so you'll have these links. So let's break down the types of abuse, how California defines elder abuse. First category might be the most obvious is physical. So obviously it's hitting, kicking, pushing, slapping, you know, causing bodily injury. Sometimes that's overlooked because older adults maybe bruise easier. So we expect to see bruising on older adults. However, you need to be aware the difference between something that's perpetrated on the older adult as opposed to an accident. For instance, you know, bruising around the wrists or neck, that could be a red flag that something's going on. The other thing I like to point out in physical abuse that's not so obvious is over or under medicating someone is a form of physical abuse. So sometimes we see in long-term care settings, they'll over-medicate the patients to keep them docile, easier to maneuver. That's a form of physical abuse. Or in the home setting, a caregiver might take the older adults' pain medications and either use them for themselves or sell them on the streets. So be aware that if you kind of spot over under medicating, that is a legal form of physical abuse. The next one is sexual. Again, pretty obvious, engaging in sexual acts without consent. We might see that more in the long-term care facility setting, but just be aware of that one. In California, we have emotional, which I'm glad we do. That's harming self-worth or emotional well-being of someone, belittling someone, name calling. Also under emotional is undue influence. So it's threatening someone that, we're going to remove you from your home if you don't do what we say, or we're going to tell your family members that you're falling for the scam and that you're probably not in your sound mind. So we do recognize emotional abuse as a legal definition. The next one is neglect. It's failing to meet basic needs like food, housing, clothing. So if you've been providing care for someone, a family member you live with, or you're a paid caregiver, and you stop providing those services, that is neglect. Inside the category of neglect is the most common form of elder abuse, and that's self-neglect. I'm sure many of you have seen this maybe in your congregation. That's when someone stops taking care of themselves. They start making bad decisions. They're not paying their rent. They're not going to their doctor's appointment. They're not eating properly. Self-neglect is the most popular, and unfortunately, it's the hardest one to rectify. It's tough because older adults have rights. So how much can you control someone is always a balance act. Just to give you a sense how popular self-neglect is, in California, our Adult Protective Services, which we have a wonderful group of APS workers, 60% of the cases every month are self-neglect cases. So out of all these 6 categories, self-neglect takes over 60% of these. And we'll talk more about this later. The next one is abandonment, leaving an older adult alone, no longer providing care. We've heard cases where people are left at bus stations, airports. Abandonment can even be, we've had issues where caregivers will take an older adult with them to the casinos, let's say, leave them in the parking lot for hours on end while they're inside gambling or whatever. That is a form of abandonment. And again, a legal definition of elder abuse. The next one is financial. Again, illegally misusing an elder's money, property, or assets. This is the second most common form of abuse out of all of these. So after self-neglect, financial. It could be a caregiver, it could be a corporation, it could be a professional, like an insurance agent, and it could be a family member. There's been studies that show that the 60% of financial abuse is perpetrated by the son, the adult son of an older adult. So something to keep in mind. Some people call it taking an early inheritance or something when they start siphoning money off of an older adult. So why are older adults targeted, and why do we talk about this so much? Physical vulnerabilities. Older adults have new needs as they get older. They have to rely on people more. Scammers realize that, and they take advantage of that. Social vulnerability. This is a double-edged sword. We want people to socialize. We want people to interact. Of course, it's important. But the social butterfly who's going to all those free lunches and everything, they might be exposing themselves to scammers more. And the person that is isolated, that doesn't go out much, which happens a lot during COVID, they're prey to scammers. Scammers know that, and they can start perpetrating abuse on an older adult, and they won't get caught as easily if the person is isolated. Side note, during COVID, these past 3 years, all forms of elder abuse skyrocketed. And I think a lot had to do with, we didn't have eyes and ears on these older adults. This is something I find really fascinating, a neurological vulnerability. As we age, our executive functioning starts to deteriorate a bit. This may cause an older older adult to rely more heavily on the advice of so-called experts. So again, the corporations, the insurance agents, the financial advisors, those bad, if they're bad actors, they prey on the neurological issues for an older adult. And financial vulnerability. Older adults with money are more at risk for financial abuse. Abusers will try to get at your assets, your homes. Here in San Francisco, we have so many older adults that are sitting on properties worth millions of dollars. Scammers know that. They want to go after that. So we're going to mostly focus on financial abuse. So I want to discuss like why older adults are targeted. So it's proven that 70% of the wealth in the US is held by people 65 and older. Again, scammers, abusers know this, so they go after this age group. Getting back to that vulnerability issues, the prefrontal cortex, and this is, I'm fascinated following studies on this. This is a part of our brain that is the last part to develop. They say as late as 25 maybe, and it's the first part of our brain to start deteriorating. And the prefrontal cortex controls our knowing right from wrong. It's about consequences. It helps you determine consequences. So it could be a good reason why teenagers sometimes act a little irrational or something, because that part of their brain hasn't developed yet. And then as it deteriorates, it's the same reason why older adults might be falling for scams more. And also not only falling for them, but repeatedly falling for scams. It's the part of our brain that just doesn't turn off to let us know that what you've done didn't work and we won't do it again. If your prefrontal cortex is deteriorating, you might just keep doing it over and over. So many people that are targeted and abused, it happens repeatedly. This one is maybe a little more controversial. Go back and forth on this. Are older adults more trusting? Supposedly in surveys, baby boomers give a highest percentage of yes to the question of, do you feel that most people can be trusted? So I think maybe scammers take advantage of older adults who might rely more kind of on a handshake. People argue back and forth on that one, but something to keep in mind. And the reason I also like to focus on financial abuse, because I want people to realize the impact it has on older adults. There was a great study done by Yale and the University of Texas, and they looked at those 6 categories that I described earlier of abuse, and they checked it against the mortality of people that have been abused and their mortality rates. And out of those 6 categories, financial abuse had the highest rate of mortality, so even more than neglect. So I think a big reason of that is once an older adult, they have their nest egg, their retirement fund, and if that gets wiped out by a scammer, it's just devastating. They lose trust. It's just awful. So things to be aware of, who are perpetrators. Family members. I mentioned the adult son is often the perpetrator. Outside caregivers, the paid caregiver can be a perpetrator. Professional, when I mention that, I mean those bad actor, like I mentioned, insurance agents, financial advisors, contractors. They can sometimes prey on older adults. Corporations. Several years ago, there was that big scandal that Wells Fargo was opening up accounts for older adults without their knowledge, additional accounts. That's a form of financial abuse. So why would someone not report abuse? I mentioned earlier, if 1 in 10 people are being abused, but we're only seeing 1 in 23 being reported, it's good to think about what could be some of these reasons so you can help people. Shame is a big one. An older adult is embarrassed that they fell for a scam. They might feel like people won't think their cognition is intact. Fear of retaliation. Scammers will, threaten people. The fear of losing independence or being moved. Again, feeling like, oh, if I fell for a scam, my kids are going to want to put me in a nursing home or something. Complex family relations. Often, and I'll explain later why I hear about so many of these different cases firsthand. I've heard cases where a son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter is taking the older adult's Social Security money or using their debit card for personal use without the knowledge of the older adult. And when you confront the older adult about this, they may realize it, but they don't want to get their favorite grandson in trouble. They don't want to get their favorite son, that's my baby. I don't want him to go to jail. So they often will overlook some of these things that are happening to them if it's done by a family member. And signs of abuse could be missed or mistaken. I mentioned the bruising, for instance. So it's sometimes it's just hard to spot it. And the older adult might be too incapacitated to report it. And that's where hopefully we can help them with that, again, by interacting with these older adults. And unfortunately, in our society, older adults can be overlooked. We have mistrust of institutions. We've had issues where undocumented citizens are working for a restaurant or a long-term care facility, and they're being abused by their employer, not getting paid correctly, overworking them or whatever, but they don't want to report it because they might not be documented. They're afraid about being deported. So there's that. Some people don't want to get involved with police, let's say, and in some of these criminal activities, we need to involve the police. So these are just some of the issues. You might come up with more, I'm sure. But these are just things to keep in mind about why there's this underreporting issue. And cultural differences and perceptions. Different cultures will have different tolerance levels of, let's say, the emotional abuse, the name calling or something like that. This is a fact sheet we have made in our elder abuse prevention program. This will be available to you as well. We have this in 7 languages. I can hear from our friends at the San Francisco Interfaith Council if you need different language capacities of these. And I like this sheet because it can be both for professionals to have this at hand, and as well as the public, the consumers. Those of you maybe, you can have these at your information tables and things like that. And it covers where to report, San Francisco Adult Protective Services. I know we might have people on this call outside of San Francisco, but in California, every county has an Adult Protective Services program, and other states have them as well. I don't know, some counties combine them in some states, but in California, every county has an Elder Abuse Prevention Adult Protective Services, and it's a great resource and much needed. So I just want to let you know that this is could be available for you. So I mentioned we're going to focus on the financial abuse scams. I've been doing this for many years, and I kind of have my top 10 list. Some I'm going to move through more quickly than others. So I mentioned earlier the IRS scam. So many of us gotten that call. Please let your friends, family, clients, congregants know that the Internal Revenue Service will never call before sending a letter. So that's a big red flag. If you get the call that there's a problem with your taxes or something, do not give them any information. They want to get your Social Security number. They want to get your bank account number. Just please let people know that never take a phone call from IRS. And what I'll get into later as well is some red flags for spotting this is a sense of urgency. IRS will never say you must react now, you must do this immediately. We kind of know the government doesn't work that quickly. So keep that in mind. This one pops up a lot. The lottery scam. You won the Irish sweepstakes. You won the Jamaican lottery. Please let everyone know that it's illegal. First of all, it's illegal to play an international lottery. And it's also lotteries. It's illegal for lotteries to charge taxes or processing fees. They can't charge taxes up front. The government could take taxes out if you do win, but they can't charge taxes up front. There's no processing fee for lottery winners. And when I mentioned earlier about that prefrontal cortex in our brains, I think this one really preys on, the lottery scam preys on that deterioration of that prefrontal cortex. I think scammers know that, and they keep getting money out of someone. They'll say, you just need to pay the $500 processing fee to win that $14 million. Or, and then they contact you again. Oh, you need to pay the taxes, this $1,000 taxes on this thing. So again, if our prefrontal cortex isn't working properly, we might keep falling for it. And they prey on the fear of missing out, FOMO. They'll use phrases like, just yesterday we gave away $14 million to someone in your state. This is great. You're the next one to win it. That person won $14 million. You can win it too. They prey on that. Identity theft. That's, getting a hold of someone's social security number. And then charging and billing things, getting credit card numbers. Identity theft is popular. It's interesting to know that you can purchase social security numbers on the black market for as little as $20. So scammers do that, and then they start messing with your taxes and things like that. Or use the social security number to impersonate you. Ransomware. We are so happy that older adults are using computers more and more. We need them for our telehealth and things like that. And that's great, but it opens them up to scammers. I know it certainly happened to me as well. What scammers will do is they'll purposely secure a URL address that's slightly different than a popular company name. For instance, I was looking up Anna's Linens here in San Francisco when it was open to get the hours, and I typed in 1N instead of 2, and I got a pop-up on my screen. I'm sure some of you have gotten this. Your computer's has a virus. Call this number immediately. Our tech department will fix it for you. Please let everyone know that don't do that. Usually you could just rectify it by pulling the plug on your computer or router. If it really is an issue, go to a brick and mortar company like Best Buy or something to get your computer fixed, or the Geek Squad. But never use that number that pops up on your screen, because what they'll do is not only try to charge you for fixing your computer that's not broken, but then they get access to your computer. They'll ask to share your computer with them so they can fix it. And then they start getting all your contact information, your banking information, all the things you keep on your computer. So be aware of ransomware. The next one, unfortunately, it continues to be popular. It's probably now up in the top 3 or 4. The grandparent scam, I call it. This is when a scammer will contact an older adult, maybe early in the morning when they're just waking up, not thinking clearly, or late at night, they're tired, and they impersonate a grandchild, let's say. Grandma, it's me, your favorite grandson. Grandma goes, Johnny, and he's got an in. I'm on spring break, I had a little bit of trouble with my car. Can you please wire me or to my mechanic, $1,000 to fix my car? Don't tell mom and dad, I don't want to get in trouble. Or it could be someone saying it's a lawyer for your grandson. He got in trouble while, on spring break, and he needs bail money. Please wire money to this number. People unfortunately fall for this. They sound very convincing. I've heard recordings from these scammers. They're great actors. They use excuses like, oh, you don't recognize me, grandma, I have a cold. So my voice sounds a little funny. They just have all ways of getting around that. And the grandparent is concerned. They want to take care of their grandchild or their nephew or niece. So just be aware of that. And scammers, scammers follow the headlines in all of these scams, and I'll talk more about that. But now, we all hear about AI, artificial intelligence, and how it's getting more accessible and developed. Well, scammers are using that as well. I guess it's not that expensive to buy a piece of a machinery or software that can clone a voice. I know they're doing with music artists and things. So what they're doing is they're getting a clip of that grandson or granddaughter, which, social media, you can often find someone's, you can hear someone's voice on a social media post, a little video clip, TikTok, whatever. And then they can manipulate what they're saying to sound exactly like your grandson or granddaughter. So, that's, unfortunately, it's going to be harder and harder to detect this grandparent scam. But something to be aware of. They'll sound just like the child. So what I recommend people do is have a family password. I've heard that helps, coming up with a simple word, poodle or something, so that when you get that call from a loved one saying they're in trouble, say, okay, I'll help you, but what's the family password? So that's a little fix around, but it's just something to be so aware of. The next one that's also hit the higher on the charts these days is the sweetheart romance scam. Again, we want older adults to socialize. It's great. We'd love them to meet partners. Certainly these dating sites are starting to market to older adults more and more too. Scammers, again, follow that. They know that, so they make up fake posts. They reach out to you. I think we're a match. They start building a relationship, and then they start asking for money. Usually a lot of times they'll claim they're a military. I'm over in Iraq, and I'm sergeant. I think we're meant to be together, but I have some medical issues I need to get cleared up. Maybe you can help me pay for that and I'll pay you back so that I can get to visit you. Or if it's, in the States, let's say, they string you along. And then when it's finally time to try to meet, they'll say, oh, my car needs work. Can you help me with that? I'll pay you when we get together. Or my children have some health issues. So they, all along they've been sending letters, they've been sending pictures, fake pictures. I've heard people tell me they get poems, and they fall in love online, and they start extracting money from you. It can go on for months and months, and they just build this relationship. To make it even more complicated is what they'll often do is groom you to be a money mule. So this scammer is oftentimes overseas. They've made their money scamming in the United States, but they don't want that trail showing the money going to them where they are in whatever country. So what they'll do is even send you money and then ask you to forward it on. Again, like maybe that military person in Iraq says, I just inherited $1 million, and we've had dollar amounts that high. If I send you the money, would you please now then forward it to me because it's hard for me to get the money in Iraq? Or they'll ask you to purchase iPhones and iPads and then pawn them and send the money over to them. It's a way for them to then get this money that's not traceable. The thing to know about money mules, it's illegal to be a money mule. These older adults have gotten into trouble, especially if they've been warned that, what you're doing sounds like it's a money mule situation, you need to stop. But again, maybe that prefrontal cortex isn't working correctly, and this is the love of their life, so they're going to do whatever it takes to get the money to them. So be very aware that not only are they trying to extract money from you, but they want to use you as a money mule. So something to keep in mind when you're talking to your friends and family. Charities, I mentioned that scammers follow the headlines. When COVID came along, bunch of charities started popping up, fake charities. Just be very concerned, do your homework. Never just give money without doing some investigating. One of the sites that we hear is very good is charitynavigators.org. That tells you the validity of a charity. And by the way, all of these that I've mentioned have increased during COVID because these people were isolated. For instance, the grandparent scam. If you're not talking to your parent frequently or visiting them daily or taking them out to lunch, you're not going to know that this fake grandchild contacted them. So all of these have just skyrocketed during COVID, unfortunately, and that's why it's so helpful that you have this information. And now that people hopefully are going back to church in person, you can meet with your clients and congregants in person. We can start chipping away at some of these things. Just going to check the time. Okay, we're pretty good. Home improvements. Again, I mentioned older adults are sitting on these properties. Scammers want to get at them. So they'll try to extract money from you. We've had cases where someone dressing up in sort of as a contractor, they have a piece of roofing tile in their hand. They knock on your door and they tell you, oh, I'm working on a neighbor of yours' house. I'm doing their roof. I happened to walk by your yard and I found this piece of tile in front. It looks like your roofing needs work. And so they try to get you that way. What they want to do is charge you an exorbitant down payment deposit to do the work. And then they never show up, of course. You should know that it's illegal to charge more than 10% of a estimated bill. And it's very easy to check contractors through the Contractor State Licensing Board. You can check the validity of a contractor. Every state has one. You just Google California State Licensing Board. It pops up, you put the name in, or if they give you a contractor number, you can see if it's real. They'll also maybe be with a partner, and while they're talking to you, distracting you, their partner is maybe looking through your mail to get some of your identifying information, your bank accounts and things. So that's something to be aware of too if you have two people that show up at your door. We had an issue with that with PG&E a couple of years ago here in San Francisco, where people were dressed up as PG&E workers, and one would distract the client and the other would be then rifling through their materials. Medicare scam. This always happens when there's open enrollments. Scammers start contacting people. There's an activation fee they'll tell you to activate your Medicare card when you get it in the mail. There is no activation fee to do that. And what they'll also do is try to get your number, your Medicare account number, and then start charging things against it. Sometimes you see those late night commercials for the free wheelchairs and free electric chair wheelchairs. If you're a Medicare person, realize that Medicare only covers durable equipment and needs a doctor's prescription. So your doctor would need to sign it. And when you maybe tell this caller that's going to offer you a free walker or something like that, they'll say, oh, don't worry about it. We have our own doctors on staff. They can write the prescription. A red flag right there. So really don't take those solicitations about getting some free equipment. The last one that I'll discuss right now is pension poaching. We have seen several years ago, veterans get lots of, well, not enough probably, but they get many benefits, and scammers are aware of that. And this is where the professional scammers kind of come into play. So it's illegal for financial advisors or insurance agents to make a commission on a veteran's benefit. So for instance, there is something we kept seeing happening was there's an aid and attendance benefit that a veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran can get. And that's money. If you qualify, it's money you get every month towards home care. What financial advisors were doing were going to wealthier veterans and telling them, hey, I can get you this benefit. I just need to make you look poor on paper. So let's put your money in an annuity, or let's gift it to someone temporarily so that you apply for the aid and attendance benefit, you get accepted, then you get your money back. A couple of things to know about that is annuities are probably not a good idea for an older adult. It ties up the money, and insurance and financial advisors make a ton of money on annuities commission. So that's a red flag. And unfortunately, what was happening, it was bankrupting this wonderful benefit, aid and attendance. We sent out a lot of what they call bully memos to insurance agents and financial advisors, letting them know that this is illegal. We worked with policymakers to start doing more of a look back period on this, which has been helpful, so that, you know, if someone has a huge amount of assets and then all of a sudden it's not there. So they'll go back 5 years now and check that. The other thing with pension poaching is that, and veterans, is AARP repeatedly do reports, and for some reason veterans are more likely to be scammed. Again, maybe because there are more benefits available to them, so scammers try to go after veterans. So I think it was like a 40% higher rate than civilians for that. So again, if you work with veterans, spouses of veterans, just be aware that they could be getting scammed. And then going back to the following the headlines that scammers do, recently there's this big, I've certainly seen these commercials, Camp Lejeune. It was like a civil, I'm trying to think of the word. The pension poaching is, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There's this class action suit against Camp Lejeune. So if you had been exposed to certain chemicals, you have money coming to you. So scammers know that, and so they were starting to attack people, telling them they're the ones that are giving out the money, and they get your identifying information. Great. So this is, I like this slide because it's pretty graphic, and it shows you, I talked earlier about all the different reporting entities, Federal Trade Commission, and I mentioned the romance scam. I'd like to show you that while everyone falls for scams, look at the 50, 60, 70, how much higher loss of money is happening to this older adults. Okay, Trey, I think you said there's a 3-minute heads up, but we're going to 9:45, right? You can put that in the chat if you want. So I like this one because, again, you can see the dollar amounts lost. And when I talked about 70% of the wealth in the United States is 65 and older, the scammers obviously are preying on that. I can't wait to see the pink line when we get the fourth quarter in, because I just know for sure. Okay, 9:30, great. I just know for sure that the 60 to 69 is going to surpass 2020. So yeah, unfortunately, these things just are not going away. So red flags, death of a spouse, scammers again, scour the newspapers and such. They look at the obituaries. They contact the surviving spouse who might not be thinking clearly at the moment. Change in financial habits. If your congregant is going to the bank more often than they usually do, more importantly, gift cards, they're all of a sudden purchasing gift cards or wire transferring money, big red flag, because scammers know it's hard to trace that. Once that wire transfer goes through, it's nearly impossible to get that money back. Once you read the numbers off the back of a gift card to the scammer, and they take the money from your gift card, it's hard to get that back. The new friend, again, we want people to socialize, like I mentioned, but just, double check when they talk about the person they met online at Walgreens that offered to carry their bags out to the car or offered to bring them into their house. Then they when they get into your house, they again look for identifying information of yours they could take. They start offering to balance your checkbook, things like that. So just be very aware of this new friend. I'm going to skip that one. Change in appearance. Again, your congregant that comes to church every week and is well coiffed and put together, their hair is always done, the clothes are always clean. If all of a sudden you're seeing a change in their appearance, their behavior, eating habits, you might want to just delve a little bit into something might be going on. Estate planning. All of a sudden that new friend is put on the will or something, or their gardener or their caregiver. You might want to just do some little open-ended questioning about that. So can you spot it? Maybe again, if you're a social worker or something, doing assessments, home visits, reaching out to a client or a congregant, just hear what's going on in their life. They might give you some tips that something might be going on. And if you're unsure, again, it doesn't hurt to just ask, how did you meet this person? Just, don't be, don't try to put the blame on them, but just keep it open-ended. Are you comfortable with that? Sometimes they'll open up and say, you know what, it feels a little funny that this person is doing this or something. How does your family feel about it? Is another good open-ended question. They might say, oh, I was told not to tell my family about it. And that could be a red flag. Or they could say, yeah, my family is really concerned. So I kind of covered this a little bit in my talk. Tactics of abusers, they'll gain trust. The isolation, they'll isolate you from your family members. They'll change your cell phone number, let's say, and then they have full access to you. The manipulation, the fear of missing out. Real quick, we had I loved hearing this, well, a sad story, but some scammers will rent a fancy car for the day. They'll park in front of your house and they'll tell you, you won this car in the sweepstakes. It's yours. Look at it. It's right there. You just need to pay the processing fees, things like that. And they go from house to house with the same car and do that. Threaten, false promises. This is another resource that we have available for you here in San Francisco. Some of these things are statewide, but a lot of these are kind of local to the Bay Area. So you'll have this at hand. Just some legal resources. Often with financial abuse, you're going to need to lawyer up. There's some good legal resources here. I try to tell people, don't use the little card, the index card that's posted on the bulletin board somewhere that says they're a legal expert. Work with some of these legal assistance to the elderly, California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. They all have vetted lawyers on hand. So reporting abuse. We're going to move through this quickly. Who is a mandated reporter? Like I mentioned, most of you on this call are probably mandated reporters. So it's any person who assumes full or intermittent responsibility in care of an older adult, whether they receive money or not. So health practitioners, police, firemen, social workers, faith leaders, all these professions are mandated reporters. If you just suspect abuse, you need to report it. Banks, I put a smiley face there because that took a little longer to get them as mandated reporters, but they are. I don't think they do it enough. When I mentioned people going and wiring money, banks get a report every day, a suspicious activity report that will spit out from the computer that shows any anomalies in someone's behavior and dollar amounts. So banks have this information at hand. They need to contact Adult Protective Services more, though. One profession that's not on here, I don't know if you can spot it, it's lawyers. Lawyers are not mandated reporters. There's a client-lawyer confidentiality issue. What I do recommend, what lawyers could do is have that client sign a letter saying that if my lawyer suspects there's abuse, they will contact Adult Protective Services. So that's a workaround, but right now lawyers are not mandated reporters. So really, you don't need to be sure. You don't need to prove the abuse. You just have to suspect it. APS here in San Francisco, we have over 60 APS workers just for our 7x7 square miles. they're swamped with cases, but let them do the investigating. You can always also call to consult. Just say, I'm suspicious about something. Is this valid, do you think? And they'll take it from there. This is the form that a mandated reporter needs to fill out. So it's very, I've done it myself. First, your legal obligation is to call here in San Francisco. The number is 415-355-6700. Each county has their own number. You need to report abuse within 24 hours, the phone call. You need to follow up within 2 working days with this form. It's online. If you Google APS report form, it'll pop up for your county. It's very simple. You need to submit that. What I recommend before you make that phone call is print this out, fill it out so that you have that information available and handy, ready to go. If you work within a team, a unit or something, you don't necessarily have to make the call. It could be a supervisor, but you are responsible that it gets done. So just keep that in mind. I think I have about 4 minutes. So the role of APS, some great news happened in January 2022. They lowered the age of who is eligible for adult protective services. Excuse me. I mentioned earlier that 65, the beginning 65 is the definition of an older adult. That's still the case legally, but in California, someone 60 and older can have an APS report made for them, and they can make an APS report. And then the dependent adult, of course, 18 to 59. So great news to keep in mind. You have family members, friends, congregants that are 60, you can make an APS or suggest they make an APS report. And APS's goal is to maintain the health and safety of elder and dependent adult in the community. People think sometimes that APS wants to remove you from your home, put you in a nursing home or something. It's not the case. They want to keep you as home in the least restrictive environment as possible. So what APS does, if you haven't made a report, they investigate allegations and then they collaborate with law enforcement. There's cross-reporting. They'll carry out a safety plan. Last resort is refer for conservatorship. I mentioned that self-neglect cases. Sometimes it's just someone is so incapacitated, they cannot take care of themselves. They will proceed with the conservatorship, but they don't want to do that if they don't have to, because it really does take away an adult's rights. And they'll advocate on behalf of the client. They'll set up a plan. Be aware, APS is a short-term case management program. It's not ongoing. So they'll put things in place, work with other agencies, excuse me, organizations, and then they sign off and they close the account. This is a spreadsheet you'll have that kind of walks you through the process. Many of you may be going to long-term care facilities. Excuse me, I have terrible allergies. If you work with long-term care facilities, clients there, it's a little different. You would contact police and the ombudsman's office, and those phone numbers are on there. Again, you'll have access to this. If you do call APS in a long-term care facility settings, don't worry about it. They'll refer you to the ombudsman's. So I'm going to go back here. So I did mention that you just need to suspect it. APS workers will contact police, like I mentioned, and vice versa. The police will contact APS if they come across a violent crime. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to move on to here because I want to leave room for questions. I know also you're going to have an access to other resources, but you'll have it here as well. So Trey, Michael, do you want to open this up now? Or?
Glenn, first and foremost, I want to say thank you. This has been a comprehensive presentation with a lot of important information. And before we get to the questions, I just wanted to remind all of the attendees that they will be getting a copy of the recording link today, as well as the slide deck. What other resource links have you supplied to complement and augment this presentation?
Actually, that last page should cover it. The last page, and I also want to just go back to the APS thing. and reporting to APS, I want people to realize too, APS will never let the person that they go to visit know who made the report. So if you're making it on behalf of a congregant or something that you suspect abuse is going on, don't feel like it's going to jeopardize your relationship with that person. APS will never, it's a HIPAA, privacy issue. They will never let the person they're going to visit know who made the report. So it won't jeopardize. As a mandated reporter, also, you do, if it's during working hours and you're making this in your work capacity, you do need to give your name. But again, they will never pass that along. Excuse me. If you're making a report as a concerned citizen, off hours, a neighbor, you can even do it anonymously. Excuse me. So I just want people to be aware of that.
Thank you. I just want to scroll up a little bit. Okay, we have from Katie Schwartz. I've had elders get extremely angry with me when I try to protect them from scams. They think I am being intentionally unhelpful or refusing to address their crisis. Any advice on best ways to navigate this anger and maintain relationships even as you protect and refuse to take the actions they want?
That's a great question. It might sound kind of basic, but meeting them at their level, asking them, what are you getting out of this interaction? Are you seeing results? Are you getting money if people are asking for money? So just try to meet them at their level. That's the best thing I would say.
Wonderful. I just wanted to, David Chan reminds us that athlete coaches are also mandatory reporters.
I'm sorry, what coaches?
Athlete coaches are mandatory.
Athletic coaches? Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I'm not sure where aging adults fit with athlete coaches, but we have some spry older adults, and we should include them. From Pam and Larry Dannenberg, what about grandparent scams or other scams saying, I can help you, and then call the relative to see how they are doing? I'm not sure where that's going, but if you want to take a stab at it.
Maybe one more time at that?
Sure. What about for grandparent scam or other scams saying, I can help you, and then call that relative to see how they are doing? I'm wondering if it's
I'm kind of drawing a blank on that.
Well, yeah, what I'll do is I'll ask Pam to elaborate, and then maybe we can get back to everybody afterwards. From Angela Hay, what about reporting to the California Social Services Licensing Department, regional offices for assisted living care violations, or versus ombudsman, which is better?
Well, I think ombudsman should be the first line of defense. So work with them. The other organization is good too. And ombudsman would maybe even help you with that referral. But I know here in San Francisco, we have a very robust ombudsman's office. They advocate for clients in nursing homes and long-term care facilities, SNFs. So yeah, ombudsman's the first line.
Okay. I'm going to ask Trey, are you there?
Yes.
Trey, would you just chime in on the resource links that will be going out today, as well as the slide deck and the recording link?
Yes, and just in response to Pam and Larry, I think their point was, if your grandson calls you and says, I'm in need of help, hang up and call their number and say, did you just call me?
Oh. Okay.
I think that's what, because nowadays with technology, these hackers can actually show up with a phone number that is not the number they're calling you from. Exactly. And so they're saying, if it really is an emergency and, you can hang up and then you can call your grandson or whoever it is and say, did you really just call me?
I will tell you on that note, my own mother of blessed memory, she was becoming forgetful in her old age, but she received one of these calls, and the tip off that it was a scam was the person didn't call her by her Greek name for grandmother. And so that was very, very helpful. But I can see how this would be just, I mean, this could be just devastating for people. Trey, on the links that you're.
So Glenn has provided us links and PowerPoint. And so we're going to put that into a PDF. Cynthia is on the SFIC team is going to make sure that you get all of those links and phone numbers that we put into the chat, and also the PowerPoint presentation with a lot of those great resources. We're going to make that a PDF, and then we're going to have a link for you in a follow-up email. So it'll all be available in this room.
Great. Excuse me for interrupting. I just want to speak to a couple of points. Trey, that was great. You brought up about the phone numbers. Now the caller IDs on our phone, scammers can manipulate that. So it looks like it's a call from the San Francisco Police Department or a call from the PG&E. You can't trust that, and do hang up, research the correct number to call and call that number. Yeah, so that's something to be aware of. And Michael, speaking to the point with your mother, the social media now is so prevalent and so many people are on it that you can learn so much about a person through social media. So I'll know the name of their dog, and these are ins. I mean, that person didn't do their homework with the Greek word for grandma, but you can find out so much about people online and have that as an in.
Glenn, we are so grateful. I mean, this was an amazing way to start out this series. We had an overwhelming number of people on the line, so we are grateful for that. And we want to, in addition to thanking you, we want to thank Trey and Cynthia for their support, and invite everybody to join us next Thursday at 8:30 for the second in our Empowering Older Adults training series, which will focus on important resources. This concludes today's program. We thank you for being with us. God bless you and God keep you.
Thank you.